go into LA and sweep the Clippers and the Lakers both over the weekend on what was an historic weekend. The latest on Dillon Brooks' injury, how much fun this team is having right now. And while it may be the most fun roster in franchise history, is this truly the best Grizzlies roster in franchise history? I'll give some insight as to why I think it just might be. That and much more on this edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Here we go.
Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, one and all, to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Happy Monday morning to you, and hope wherever you are and wherever you are listening, your new year is getting off to a great start. If you're a Memphis Grizzlies fan, it has to be with how well this team is playing since, they're undefeated in the new year. My name's Shawn Coleman. You can find me at StatsSAC on Twitter. You can find the show at Locked On Grizz. This is my fourth season covering the Grizzlies, writing for them over at Grizzly Bear Blues, and of course, your host here at Locked On Grizzlies, your Grizzlies every day. You can find the show at Locked On Grizz on Twitter, myself at StatsSAC. Right here on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below. Lets us know you enjoyed the show. Lets others know where they can find the show, but also just in general makes the show as good as it possibly can be for everyone involved. So a really exciting time to be a Grizzlies fan, and also a really important, significant weekend for a variety of reasons for the Memphis Grizzlies. Listen, we've got a lot of positivity to talk about, obviously, from one of the most spectacular blocks we've seen in recent NBA history to a team that now has set a new record for most consecutive wins in franchise history, to a team that also has clearly cemented itself as one of the top four teams in the Western Conference. But before we get to all the positivity, I also want to address, some pretty unfortunate news that came out over the weekend. Of course, what I'm getting at is early in the game on Saturday, in which the Grizzlies, were able to defeat the Clippers 123-108. Dillon Brooks obviously had an unfortunate situation in which he came down on BJ Boston's foot, and it led to Dillon severely rolling his ankle. It looked pretty bad. It looked to the level of the ankle injury that John Morant had suffered in Brooklyn at the start of last year, back on December 28th of 2020. So Dillon Brooks obviously could not put any weight on the ankle, had to be carried off. Well, thankfully, even though it's unfortunate, thankfully we didn't have to wait long until we got some information on what was going on. Dillon Brooks will now be out 3 to 5 weeks with a severe left ankle sprain. Obviously, the thing about it is that would probably put his return right around the All-Star game, right around probably the middle of February. So it's unfortunate for a variety of reasons. Number one, thankfully it's nothing long-term as far as his ankle goes. He didn't break it or anything like that, but unfortunately it's going to keep him out for a month. Obviously, the impact of Dillon Brooks on the Grizzlies defense, his loss is going to be felt. Though the Grizzlies are playing better as a whole when it comes to their defensive capabilities, you're obviously at your best when it comes to seeing Dillon Brooks on defense. And in general, it's just unfortunate because, again, we've got to wait a longer period of time until the Grizzlies can finally get together a stretch of games where they've got their best talents available to play with them. So it certainly is unfortunate, but it also is a bit fortunate in that, it's nothing long-term. Dillon will now be able to rest the ankle, and with how well the Grizzlies are playing, there's no reason to rush him back. And at the end of the day, this is just more opportunity for other players to step up and deliver in Dillon Brooks' absence. And boy, did they do that this weekend. So certainly wanting Dillon Brooks to recover as soon as possible. But the good thing about how well the Grizzlies are playing right now is that when these type of injuries occur, it's unfortunate, but this Grizzlies team, maybe more than any other team in the NBA, is more than capable of having the next man step up, and that will allow for Dillon to take advantage of the rest that he needs over the next month or so. But besides that, This weekend was a spectacular weekend. The Grizzlies without John Morant and unfortunately without Dillon Brooks for a good part of the game, without Kyle Anderson and others, they were able to get a 123-108 victory on Saturday. Desmond Bane stepping up 5 threes, 20 points in the game. Jaren Jackson Jr. stepping up 5 blocks, 20 points in the game. And what did they both do last night? They both did the exact same thing. That's the story from this weekend. The Grizzlies were without Ja on Saturday, and they had Ja back, but he was not at his, fully capable scoring best on Sunday. But it was Jaren Jackson Jr. and it was Desmond Bane who put together consecutive outstanding performance. Desmond Bane joined Mike Miller, Troy Daniels, and Mike Conley as the only players to have 20 or more points and 5 or more threes in consecutive games in Grizzlies franchise history. Jaren Jackson Jr. becomes only the 4th player, joining Pau Gasol, Stromile Swift, and Roy Rogers to have 5 blocks in 2 or more consecutive games. But he also backed it up with 20-plus points both Saturday and Sunday. The key to all of this for the Grizzlies is that without Dillon, without Ja, without Kyle, with this group, without Steven Adams, with some of their significant talents out, the Grizzlies still had the resourcefulness to step up and win because they were able to have 2 of their better players deliver to a level that they may not consistently deliver to, but that was needed this weekend. And of course, because of those efforts, because of the Grizzlies stepping up and collectively playing very good defense both on Saturday and Sunday when they needed to, the Grizzlies have now set a franchise victory for the most wins in a row. The Grizzlies have won 9 straight games in a row, and every one of them have been different, basically, as to how they were won. To start the streak, it was the Grizzlies' ability to get offensive rebounds, to create advantages, possession advantages, to be able to beat teams. As of late, it's the defense that, once again, is stepping up and delivering. But the big key is we talk about how deep this team is and how resourceful this team is. But the other key is, just like I talked about last week, is that it's not only everybody doing well within the role that they're defined to do, but it's also nearly everyone on the roster stepping up into a bigger role and succeeding when they have to. And that's exactly what Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane did. And let's not look past the fact that the Grizzlies in the game against the Lakers, they had 33 assists, 10 steals, 10 blocks, and 125 points scored. That's only the second time in Grizzlies franchise history they've played that complete of an offensive game, or an offensive and defensive game at the same time. Again, 125 points, 10 steals, 10 blocks, 33 assists. That's only the second time the Grizzlies have done it. It's only the second time a team has ever had 125 points, 30-plus assists, 10-plus steals, and 10-plus blocks in a game against the Lakers. You typically don't see a team perform on both ends of the court at the same time like the Grizzlies did last night. And it becomes even more amazing when you consider the fact that they're doing it without a Dillon Brooks, and they're doing it without a Steven Adams. And it's not just Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. and John Morant when he's back. You've got those layers of duos, right? Those layers of duos who are coming in and playing well. Last night, it was Kyle Anderson and Brandon Clark. Kyle Anderson, 14 points, 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 blocks, 2 steals. On Saturday, it was Brandon Clark, 18 points, 14 rebounds, 3 blocks. Every single game, the Grizzlies are either having a duo of reserves or a singular reserve, either stepping into the starting lineup and delivering, or being able to do it off the bench. And another thing we haven't even talked about is the fact that Zaire Williams has looked wonderful in his return to play, even though he may not have that big of a role moving forward. So that's what stands out. That's what stands out about this Grizzlies team right now. Is that, again, while there's layers and layers and layers of depth that comes through in different ways and in different times to help the Grizzlies win games right now, there's so many different aspects of this Grizzlies team that's pointing to them not only having fun, but having success in so many different ways, night in and night out. And to top all of it, the Grizzlies have now won or 3-0 against the Clippers, and they're now 3-4 against the Lakers this year. That is a huge advantage. That's a tiebreaker advantage, an extra layer of ability for the Grizzlies to rely on, for them to be able to have the advantage when it comes to the playoffs. That's huge, as teams are going to start getting healthier behind the Grizzlies and are going to start positioning themselves to make the best playoff run possible. Well, the thing about it is, at least for the first round, they're going to have to go through Memphis to do that, it seems. That's what pays off by the Grizzlies being so successful here recently. But the thing about it is this, is that it's not just on the court in terms of stats and performance and things like that. This Grizzlies team is having a hell of a lot of fun doing what they're doing. And in my opinion, it's the most fun roster we've seen as far as covering the Grizzlies or watching the Grizzlies in many years. I'll discuss that in just a moment. But before we do, I want to talk a bit about, Built Bar. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. I've talked about it, since 2020, since the bubble of 2020. And even since then, Built Bar is a lot like the Grizzlies. It's a great source of satisfaction for you, whether you have it in the morning for breakfast, in the afternoon as a snack, regardless of when you enjoy it. Like the Grizzlies, it's going to consistently perform as being there for you as a source of success to make your day better. And if you go to Built.com right now, a lot like the Grizzlies, who have so many different options they could choose from, the Built Bar provides over 18 different flavors you can choose from as your next option when it comes to to making your day better. Go to Built.com right now, choose, remember, 18 different flavors, and use the promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order from Built Bar. Can't thank you enough for joining this edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Again, making sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube and making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. But the NFL season, regular season, is officially over. We are now at the time to enjoy the playoffs, and there just so happens to be a team that won the number 1 seed in the AFC right here. Go Titans. After making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Titans with Tyler Rowland as your second listen of the day. But whoever you cheer for, whether your team's in the playoffs or not, check out the Locked On NFL podcast show of your choice as your second listen of the day after you make Locked On Grizzlies your first listen. So I talked about last week when the Grizzlies had went to Brooklyn, that one of the things that's starting to stand out with the Grizzlies, beating Phoenix, a couple of weeks ago in Phoenix, beating Brooklyn last week in Brooklyn. The thing that stands out about this Grizzlies team, and that this past week, they've won 5 games in 7 days. The week before that, John Morant won Player of the Week. The month before that, Taylor Jenkins was Coach of the Year. As the Grizzlies start to have more success in these bigger markets against the NBA's best teams, you're going to start hearing more about them. And Mike Vorkunov of The Athletic wrote a couple of great stories, one about Desmond Bane, but also about the Grizzlies in general, about just how much confidence, swagger, ability this team is playing with. As a matter of fact, it seems that an executive from another team, an executive that remained anonymous, he stated that he felt that the Grizzlies talk more trash. He used another word. They do more talking on the court than any team in the NBA. And last night, we saw it. Last night, John Morant's spectacular block, right? Probably one of the best blocks that we've seen in quite a while. Just a spectacular effort that was surreal, that you had to watch multiple times over to believe. We saw that. We also saw, though, that Desmond Bane didn't back down from LeBron James. Him and LeBron James got into it multiple times last night, which would go along with an anonymous executive saying the Grizzlies talk more trash than anybody in the league. And we know Dylan Brooks certainly does it as well. And my response to that is this: you're damn right they do. That is correct. You're damn right that right now the Grizzlies are talking the most trash in the league, because that's the Grizzlies. That's this roster. This isn't a roster that's full of arrogant individuals. This isn't a roster that's full of individuals looking to start confrontation. This is a roster that is full of confidence within themselves and within their roster, that has no problem making it known how big of an impact their confidence has and how big of a source it is for their success. And they go in, and right now they're going out every single game and proving it. So do the Grizzlies talk more trash than anybody in the NBA? I don't know. I'm not there to hear what's going on the court. But do I feel that there's a good chance that they do? Yes. But they have every right to right now because they're backing it up. So you're damn right. This team is going to talk trash. But the thing about it is, you're damn right also, they're going to back it up. But again, going back to why this team is playing with so much confidence, playing with so much swagger, is because they're having fun doing it. I talked about over the weekend, now that the Grizzlies have won 9 straight games, is this the best Grizzlies roster in franchise history? And in a moment, I'll dive a bit deeper into that. I'm not ready to make that claim myself yet. And the reason why is because you want to see this team take this momentum, take this pace that they're playing at, and put it over an entire season. I don't think that that's in any way, shape, or form being too hard or too critical of this team. You had some very good teams at the peak of the grit and grind era, but I want to see this team currently put together an entire season similar to that grit and grind era team, not in terms of style of play or anything, just in terms of general success. I want to see that happen before I say this is the best Grizzlies roster we've seen. But I think without the shadow of a doubt, one thing that can be claimed and backed up, and what's so awesome about it, this is the most fun Grizzlies roster we've seen. Not only in terms of the personalities of a Jaren Jackson Jr., of a John Morant, of a Dillon Brooks, of a Desmond Bane who's coming into his own both as a person and a player, but just in general, the love that this team shows they play for. And the 3 years of covering this team, I've been covering them now for 4 years, but coming up on 3 years during the Taylor Jenkins rebuilding now to sustainable winter era, I can't remember there being a time where there was something negative said by one source on this Grizzlies roster about another. I can't remember there being any type of issues or any type of skirmishes or anything of negativity. It's a roster full of players who love playing with each other and know that through playing with each other, that's not only going to be the best way for them to exceed expectations as a team, but also individually. Because they have a coaching staff that they love playing for. And they know what's going on with the front office. They know where they stand with the front office, with the organization, and what direction they're going into. And that becomes even more impressive when you think about players who have meant a lot to this culture when they were here, such as a Jay Crowder, such as a Justice Winslow, such as a Jonas Valanciunas and a Grayson Allen. Those are some pretty important players who you clearly know this roster loved, that this team moved on from just because it was the smart and sensible thing to do. And yet, again, this roster stays just as close as ever. Bringing in talents like a Steven Adams, who gels right in, who steps right in and becomes a big part of the culture himself. That's why this roster is so much fun. That's why they're talking trash, because they're backing it up, because they're so confident in themselves, so confident in each other, and so confident in the coaching staff in the front office that they know they're going in the right direction. They're going to play with that level of confidence and have no issue doing it. And then now when you consider that it's not just the wins, it's not just the individual statistics, it's simply players enjoying the fact that their careers are continuing to progress, that adds even more fuel to their fire to let people know about it. Jaren Jackson Jr. coming up on the league lead in blocks, one of the biggest sources of blocks plus steals on a nightly basis. Right now, Jaren Jackson Jr. is clearly in the picture to be a member of an all-defensive team. We were hoping Dillon Brooks would be on that level this year, which at times he has been when he's been on the court, but because Jaren's been healthy, it's actually him that's now performing at a level to where he can get that consideration. We know John Morant is likely going to be an all-star, but he should be an all-star starter. You want your production? Top 15 in points and assists when he's on the court in the league right now for a lot of the season. You want your moments? Go look at what he did against the Lakers with that block. Nobody else in the league probably I wouldn't say nobody else, but there are very few others who are able to make that spectacular of a block in this league. Go look at style of play. You will be hard to find another player whose style of play is more suitable for the All-Star game stage than John Morant. John Morant deserves to be an All-Star starter. And he's on his way to potentially being an All-NBA performer this year. And then, of course, Desmond Bane when it comes to being one of the better shooters in the league, as well as a most improved player. That's your trio that leads this team. And with their leadership, the rest of the team follows full of confidence. Not everybody's going to talk trash. That's not everybody's style. But through this team playing together, through this team playing at their best and playing the best we've seen a Grizzlies roster play in quite a while, they're becoming more confident. They're coming out of their shells as individuals, as young gentlemen, as a team. And they're coming right at anybody and everybody with the full confidence that they're going to win games. So sure, if the Grizzlies are talking trash right now more than anybody in the league, that may not come across the best to other people. It may rub some people the wrong way. It did that to LeBron James last night. But the thing is that is a byproduct. That is something that this Grizzlies roster has earned the right to do. Because, again, while many sources may talk and not back it up consistently, this Grizzlies roster is talking the talk and walking the walk night in and night out. So you're damn right. They have every reason to talk trash as much as they want to, as long as they consistently back it up, because it's this team playing at their best, full of confidence, full of ability to win, full of success, and full of fun. So I could certainly say, yes, this is the most fun Grizzlies roster I can remember in quite a while, maybe ever. But is it the best? Is this Grizzlies roster right now the best roster we've seen? I'll explore that in just a moment. But before I do, listen, earlier this year, the Grizzlies were probably one of the more questionable teams to bet on, with the fact that they could go out and beat, a Denver 2 games in a row, but then come back and unfortunately in the next week lose 2 games by 20. Well, right now, the Grizzlies actually probably are one of the NBA teams folks who enjoy betting and wagering on sports should bet on with confidence the most. But I can tell you with confidence the place for you to go to bet and wager on sports when it comes to you enjoying doing that. That's betonline.ag, the fastest and easiest way for you to bet on all your sports action. Make sure you go to the mobile website or on your laptop. It's a new and updated version that's spectacular to use. And make sure you put in the promo code LOCKEDON NBA. That will allow for you to be able to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's right. Head to betonline.ag right now. You can bet on the NFL. You can bet on the NBA. You can bet on the NHL. Whatever you choose to bet on, BetOnline is a great place for you to do it. And if you use the promo code LOCKEDON, you'll get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Make sure to check out betonline.ag today. On tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast, right after the Grizzlies play 2 important games on one of the NBA's biggest stages in LA, the stage of significance now shifts to Memphis as the Grizzlies will welcome back the Grizzlies will welcome the Golden State Warriors to the FedEx Forum, plus the return of Klay Thompson with Steph Curry to the Forum in a game that matches up 2 of the best teams in the West. We'll discuss that on tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Before we get any further, I want to say congratulations to Klay Thompson. Welcome back, a player who absolutely is one of the best personalities, best players in the league. Unfortunately, the prime of his career has been interrupted by unfortunate injuries, but very much excited, like the rest of the league should be, that he is back. Congratulations to him on a successful start to his return last night against the Cavaliers. So let's look at it for a second, right? The question of, okay, the Grizzlies now stand at 28-14, 42 games into a season. This Grizzlies team right now is pacing and trending towards potentially winning 50 games, something that the Grizzlies have done few times in franchise history. Now, I feel like the question starts to become fun to ask. Is this the best Grizzlies roster we have seen? We established it as the most fun. We established it as probably the most fun roster in terms of them playing and in terms of us watching that we've seen in franchise history. But is this the best roster? And again, as I mentioned in the second segment, not as of yet. I don't want to sit here and say this Grizzlies roster right now is the best that we've seen in franchise history as of right now, because I want to see them put together a full season of this type of success. But just because I'm not ready to say they're the best roster in Grizzlies franchise history right now does not mean they're not well on their way. And I'm fully confident that within the next year or so, we will have the proof that we need that, yes, this is the best Grizzlies roster we have seen in franchise history. Because by next year, within this year, you've already established John Morant is the best talent the Grizzlies have ever had. You're likely going to establish that Desmond Bane is the best shooter this franchise has ever had. And then you have Jaren Jackson Jr., who's another talent to a level we may not have seen in franchise history, plus Dillon Brooks and the depth of this team. So while I'm not ready to claim this is the best Grizzlies roster in franchise history right now, they're well on their way. And the reason why is because they're reaching heights statistically we've not seen the Grizzlies reach before. For instance, after Saturday's game against the Clippers, the Grizzlies officially had played 41 games into their season. They were half their way through a full NBA season. And the cool thing is this is the first full NBA season that this roster will have played since they came together during the summer of 2019. But the record for the most points in a Grizzlies season is 8,490 to date. This Grizzlies team is actually on pace to shatter that record. This Grizzlies team is on pace to score over 9,000 points this year. So we want to talk about a roster that's fun. We want to talk about a roster that has the potential to be the greatest roster in franchise history. A big reason why is because they're playing offense at a level we have not seen before. And besides their overall scoring, it's backed up by their ability to shoot the three. Now, yes, over the past month, despite the Grizzlies now having won 19 out of 23 games, they've not been that great shooting the three. But this team's record for most threes in a season stands at 811. They are on pace to shatter that record. They're on pace to have more than 100 threes higher than that towards the end of the season. Looking at nearly 940 threes this season, that's what the Grizzlies are on pace for. So when we talk about this team transitioning more to the modern era of basketball as they needed to, there are clear indications that they're doing that because their offensive production has been at a level we've not seen from this franchise at any point in franchise history. But it's not just the Grizzlies' ability to score. You also have the fact that the Grizzlies are playing team basketball, and they're also taking care of other components of the game at a level you've not seen before. The Grizzlies are also on pace to exceed the franchise record for most assists in a year. They're on pace to exceed a franchise record for most steals in a year. And they're on pace to exceed the franchise record for most rebounds in a year. Those are important factors because the rebounds and the steals are the two avenues that the Grizzlies have taken advantage of over their winning ways, over this winning streak, over this 6 months of success. Their ability to create steals and turn defense into offense, their ability to grab offensive possessions to gain the possession edge. Those are two key areas that have allowed the Grizzlies to have an advantage in games over this stretch of winning. And also setting the team record for most assists in a season show that they can still play well in the half court when they need to, as evidenced by last night. But another big factor with this Grizzlies team is the defensive activity that we hear Taylor Jenkins talk about. We always hear Taylor Jenkins talk about defensive activity is what we need in order to win games, and that's exactly what the Grizzlies are doing. The Grizzlies lead the league in both blocks and steals, and there's only been two teams since the year 2000 that have led the league in both blocks and steals in a single season. The last team to do it was the NBA champion Golden State Warriors in the 2016-2017 season. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the Grizzlies are going to win the NBA title. But what I am saying is that you have a clear identity of this team and that their defensive activity is the best in the league, and that's why they've had so much success. So no, at this point in time, right now, I won't say that this Grizzlies roster is better than the peak of the grit and grind era. That's no insult to anyone. It's showing respect to teams during the grit and grind era that put together a full season of success and also were able to have that success lead to making some noise in the playoffs and having playoff success. This Grizzlies roster is not on that level yet because they haven't done it over a full season to the level the grit and grind era does. But just because they haven't done it yet does not change the fact that they are showing, without a doubt, they potentially are going to do that. Without a doubt, they're eventually going to do that. Make no mistake about it. We've been wondering now. I asked Chris Harrington literally 3 or 4 weeks ago, does this version of the Grizzlies have a higher ceiling than the grit and grind era Grizzlies? And the answer is a resounding yes. Absolutely. This Grizzlies roster, without a doubt, has the potential to have a higher ceiling than the grit and grind era. And the reason why is because watching this Grizzlies team, you don't have clear indications of a ceiling that's there for them like you did in the grit and grind era. Because they just keep on rising to the occasion. They do it in different ways, and they do it on more impressive levels night in and night out despite not having their best talents. Because again, and I know I've mentioned this point quite a bit over the past several weeks, but again, despite how well the Grizzlies are playing, we still haven't even been able to see, and unfortunately won't be able to see for quite a while, we still haven't been able to see this Grizzlies team at its best. It have its full assortment of its best players to play. Hopefully we'll get that for the playoffs. But while this Grizzlies team may not be the best roster yet in franchise history, it's well on its way to being that. And it could be that as soon as the end of this year. It's a hell of a lot of fun right now. Making history, winning at a level few teams, if any, are going to win this year. Being able to go to the biggest stages in the NBA and showing that not only do we belong, but that there are stages that we're taking advantage of it. Talking trash with confidence and playing with so much fun. This is what we have all been hoping for years when it comes to Grizzlies fans. And it's here for us every single night this team plays. Hope you have an outstanding Monday. Don't forget, tomorrow we'll be back looking at the Grizzlies game against the Golden State Warriors. A big game for both teams as the Grizzlies are inching closer and closer to maybe putting themselves in the top 3 of the West. A win tomorrow night certainly would be a big step towards doing that. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. Have a great Monday. We'll talk to you soon.